whenever you hear the word should, or you hear yourself saying the word should, that is an automatic red flag, or I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, to stop and take a look at the stories that are leading to the word should. Because while there is a whole lot going on collectively, certainly, and we're all influenced by the people in our lives, by the things that we take in, whether it's podcast, media, social, whatever it is, you will be your most powerful when you are very in touch with what you want and what feels powerful to you, and not what you feel like you should be doing. This is Kindra Hall, bestselling author and keynote speaker, storytelling expert. And today on Ever Forward, we are going to be discussing the power of the story you tell yourself. If you've felt stuck, if you've been needing that injection of motivation and optimism, this is the place to be. And I can't wait for you to hear this conversation.
Okay, so when I came across your work, and more specifically, when I came across your book here, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. Immediately that title in your work, the core of what you do and how you do it, stood out immensely to me because, well, personally and professionally, storytelling, better understanding my own story has just immensely allowed me to heal and to evolve and to grow and to progress and all the things. But then also professionally, here, what we're doing today, I consider podcasting really kind of just the most modern form of storytelling. It's just here, you, me, another person or a group of people just sharing experiences and pulling out of it meaning, and what we want to take away and apply to our own life. And that's exactly kind of how you start off your book here when we're looking at the powerful stories within you and how you become your story. And I would love, please, if you could just kind of start there, because when we're talking about stories and then storytelling, I don't think we all fully realize how much we already have inside of us. It's not a matter of trying to write the next best thing or communicate the next best thing. It's really just better understanding us and then telling that, correct?
I think that's been a phrase that's coming up for me time and time again, is know thyself, know thyself. Like where is this coming from? Where is this reaction? Where is this feeling? Where is this action that I think I should take? Where is this coming from? And the answer always comes back to our stories, and stories are like our life stories. The stories that are within us are really they can be considered memories of the experiences that we've either had or been told or have been shared with us. And so often I think that we try to one of the big mistakes as I went through this research and I was taking people through this process of self-storytelling, is that we think that we have like one story, like this is my life story. But the reality is we as humans, just as we're made up of particles of DNA, and just as anything in the universe is made up of atoms, as humans are made up of very small stories. And those small stories can have a really big impact on the decisions we make, the things that we feel are available or not available to us. These stories influence the decisions, the actions, and ultimately, as you said, we become our stories. If the stories are what are making the decisions for us, that's what we ultimately become. I'm interested, like, as you said, like, what are some of the stories of your life that when you said your own personal work, like what are some of the stories that you've found as you've grown and become who you are?
Oh, we're flipping the script already.
I know, I
so
did.
soon. I love it.
So interesting. I was like, wait, I want to hear about this.
I wonder if the listener can relate, because when I really kind of began to, I guess, do the self-work, got my first journal, listened to my first podcast, read my first self-help book, was asked and began to ask myself uncomfortable, difficult, challenging, or even just different, unconventional questions. It began to really beget new questions. And those questions forced me, or I rather I felt that the answers lied within instead of searching outside like I
Mm-hmm.
was doing at that point. What if I kind of just turned and looked inward? And when I did that, it really showed me a lot of these different versions of myself and
Yeah.
kind of the explanation. It's like I was kind of finally looking at, a movie or individual movies, sections of my life, and began to really just look at it objectively. And when I would look at sections of my life, I would see a story. I
Mm-hmm.
would see an ending. I would see a middle. I would see a beginning. I would see how this story was like a prequel to another version of myself and kind of just an explanation to maybe why I'm doing what I'm doing here today. Just a big rabbit hole,
Yeah.
of what is this? How could that be? Deeper understanding, more questions. And when I then kind of pulled back high level, it was, oh, I'm really just looking at and dissecting the story of my entire life up until this point of awareness.
Yeah. Yep. And how those moments can impact us. And so, and you said right at the beginning, like I think we don't realize how much is really there in each one of us. And one of the exercises I've enjoyed doing, because I think that's the first step. So the book that we're talking about here, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. The first step is just being aware that we tell ourselves stories about ourselves, that we are made up of these stories. And so a really fun exercise. And I'd be interested to ask you this in particular, just to see like how many stories are we made of? I want to ask you, did you grow up in the United States?
I did. I grew up in Virginia, state of Virginia.
Okay. Okay. So I grew up in Minnesota, and I've asked this of people all across the US. I don't know that I've asked anyone outside the country, so that's why I pre-qualify it that way. But do you remember in elementary school the physical fitness testing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The
Right.
sit and reach, the mile run, the
Okay.
flex arm hang.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so what is the like, and even as I ask you that question, like what is that? You said sit and reach
Yeah.
right off the bat. Is that the one that stands out for you?
I think so, because still I'm just not flexible. And so
So here's what's crazy. Okay, you're clearly an athlete, right? Like
I train.
physically,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, okay. So I just my husband and I were literally just talking about this today. He was a Division 1 water polo player. Like this is like
There you go.
if he
Yeah.
made the choice, he could have played on the Olympic team. Many of his friends did. And I said, "Do you remember your physical fitness testing?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." First thing he said, "Sit and reach." Why? So think about this. Like anyone who's listening to this and you did the physical fitness testing, you can go right back to that place. So I've asked this question. There are people that bring up the pull-ups. That's the one that stands out for me. Lots of people get hung up on the rope climb. I don't know if you had to do the
Oh
rope.
yeah. Yeah. The cargo
Yeah.
net climb. Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's a big one for people. And then the sit and reach. And what's interesting is, so here's my husband, an athlete. Sit and reach came up for him, number one. Sit and reach came up for you, number one. Why? Because that was the one he couldn't do. And do you know what he said? He's like, "I'm just not flexible."
Yeah.
So here's this moment in his life that he can remember from third, second, first grade, and he can see it perfectly clearly. I'm sure you can picture it perfectly clearly of
I'm
like
right
trying
back
to
in
sit.
Clearbrook Elementary School. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you can see it so and trying to reach your toes. So there's a couple of things. And for me, the thing that I remember is trying to do a pull-up because I could not do it. You could not reach your toes. So a couple of things to unpack here. Number one, can you believe that you remember this moment in your life so clearly? Like of all, like I can't remember what I had for breakfast. I don't even think I had breakfast this morning. I don't know what I did 5 hours ago, but I can clearly see the physical fitness testing when I was in second grade. Okay. So that alone is or like the driver's test. Do you remember taking your driver's test?
Oh my
Like when
gosh.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but you don't think about that on a daily basis. We don't
They're
ever we
just
have
laying dormant there until we're asked or we
exactly.
revisit them. Absolutely.
And they're dormant, except that they are influencing how we see ourselves because
Mm.
you just said, "I am not flexible." My husband just said, "I am not flexible." I believed I had no upper body strength because I couldn't do a pull-up. Now, I'm pretty sure when it came to the mile run, you crushed everybody else. I'm pretty sure when it came for him for whatever, the rope climb, he could for me, I can do a gazillion sit-ups. I literally still can. I can do a gazillion sit-ups. But do I think about when I think back to that memory, do I think about the fact that I did more sit-ups than anyone? No. I think about the thing that I failed at. You don't think about the fact that you ran the mile faster than anyone and I'm just, whatever. You think about the thing that you couldn't do. So A, we have all of these stories within us and we have no idea that they're there. And B, when we do think about them, we think about the ones that illustrate our failures. And this happens in all areas of our life. We can go back 5 years, we can go back 20 years, we can go back 10 days. This is how our brain is programmed. Now, what is really important to remember if we're feeling stuck, if we're looking to make change in our lives, is that while our brain automatically focuses on these negative stories because it wants to keep you safe, it doesn't want you to go into a yoga class and make a fool out of yourself, because what if you don't find a mate because you're not flexible and then you end the species or whatever. This is how
it's going to take you back to second grade when you couldn't get that sit and reach number you needed to get. Weren't there different versions of patches, the level of patches, presidential? Yeah, exactly.
I know. So your brain is no, don't do that and all of this processing happens automatically. We don't even realize it's happening. And so then we're like, wait, why didn't I do this? Why can't I do this? Why haven't I made this progression? And we don't realize that it's happening completely invisible to us. And so what happens then when instead of focusing on the fact that we couldn't touch our toes, we focus on the fact that we can do a gazillion sit-ups? What if I just walked around actively thinking that instead of subconsciously focusing on what I can't do? What actions would I then take, whether it's physical or professional or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. Am I kind of hearing you correctly that it's really first step is trying to catch ourselves in what we're saying and how we're saying it, and then maybe posing the question, not why am I not where I want to be yet in life? Why am I not flexible? Why am I this or not this? But rather, what story am I telling myself consciously or subconsciously that is contributing to that being true and staying true or not?
Exactly. It's first catching yourself, and second, where is this coming from? And then when you actually look back, it's shocking. The small comments, I just had this realization yesterday. I was like, I told you I was in LA recently and I was like, man, you know what? I kind of want to audition for a TV show or something.
No way.
You spend 23 hours in Hollywood and suddenly you want to be on TV. So
visits LA once. Yeah.
I know, visits LA once, wants to be. And then I was like, I was a theater minor and I did a lot of, why have I never explored? I felt this, and I would imagine your listeners have felt that this little stirring, right? I feel like there's something else here. I can't quite put my finger on it. And also I can't quite put my finger on the anxiety around it, right? The assumption that I will fail before I even start. I can't put my finger on that. I now know, and hopefully now as as you read the book and as we talk here, you realize that, that probably means there's a story there. And I remembered yesterday, a college professor who I went, a mentor who I adored. I loved him. He was a theater professor. And I'd gone in and he's like, so you're about to graduate. What are your plans? And I was kind of thinking I want to go to LA and see what's there. And he's like, well, you'd have to lose 15 pounds.
Oof.
And
wow.
And it's so weird because obviously that's a terrible thing to say. So on the surface, what a terrible thing to say to somebody. Why would you ever? Okay, fine. Let's move past all of that. The worst thing is that story, I can remember exactly where I was sitting, has kept me from ever even exploring what an audition would even. I've never auditioned for anything because of that story. Isn't that, and that was like 20 years ago. So to your point, like catching that. So this feeling of like, I'm in LA for 23 hours. And I'm like, maybe I want to do, and there's this weird, like, no, I can't do that. What? You're crazy. Why would you ever? But I still feel like I want to, but I'm immediately saying no, which is an indicator to me to say what story is causing this feeling. And right away I found that story. And I was like, wow, I wonder if that is influencing. And make no mistake, sometimes it's not just influencing action, it's promoting inaction, which I think is worse in so many cases than action in a different direction, even, or just inaction, like not even considering.
Stagnancy is, I think, one of the most limiting factors we have as human beings. And when we look at why we're not progressing at all or in the direction that we had hoped for, it's really looking at where are we stagnant, where are we complacent, or at least I can reflect back and say, absolutely, whenever I was not growing, evolving, or shedding versions of myself that didn't serve me at the time, I was very comfortable and I was staying comfortable, I was staying complacent for damn sure.
Yep. You're right. Stagnancy is and those stories make you feel justified in the stagnancy. And if you don't know to look for them or question if they're there, you'll never even realize that that's why you're staying in the same place.
You know, you said a key word earlier I want to kind of pick up on, and that was influence. And I'm curious to kind of get your interpretation on this. When we're looking at stories and we're looking at maybe the stories that are the through line in our lives and the stories that might be guiding our choices here today, quite literally as we're listening, watching today, I think if we look at what influences us, by that I mean, what are we interested in? Mm-hmm. What are we doing more frequently? And I have actually kind of an example I want to share that prompted this as well. I was in the military, and so I'm always kind of naturally interested in any military themed TV shows, movies. I kind of just want to, jump back into that mode. And I was laughing, I'm chuckling now. I was watching last night the new Chris Pratt show, The Terminal List on Amazon Prime. Long story short, okay. He's this Navy SEAL who's the lone survivor of this group that goes over on a deployment, and they all get killed, and it's like a big scandal. And he, in this one scene, he is set up on a sniper post, basically in the woods, taking out one of his enemies. And I immediately got this flashback to our senior drill instructor during my time in boot camp in the Army. And I was checking a lot of boxes. I was performing very well, very high in long range marksmanship. And he came and approached me and asked just interest in maybe after boot camp. He's like, hey, soldier, what about sniper school? Mm. And, so right then and there, I got this feedback of I was doing a task and I was doing it well enough to catch the attention of somebody that wanted me or wanted to question me about, hey, pursuing that further. And I shared that story with my wife, and she's like, shut up. She didn't know me in the military, so she doesn't know sergeant shooting. She only knows civilian chase, And but I immediately, just in my heart of hearts, I was like, I can do that. Like, I know I can. And so it made me just kind of think, as you were talking about influence, what am I being influenced by in life, or what are kind of the natural things that are influencing me? Is it because I'm actually interested in them, or is there a story there that was started and maybe has yet to be kind of finished, or I'm subconsciously wanting to kind of go back and, write some more with that?
I feel like you nailed it right there. I think that we are, to answer your story with a story, my kids right now are in acting camp, which is so funny because I was like, oh, I want to. So this is aside from my 23 hours in LA.
I said you should have taken them with you to LA. Maybe it could have been a family deal. Yeah.
I really should have. But so this is completely aside from that. But my kids are at acting camp, and we were taking the subway home just before you and I are here together. And my son on the subway said, I'm a little. He's going into 6th grade. It's like, I'm a little confused. And I said, okay. And he said, because I wanted to be I wanted to be an author when I grew up, but I really like acting. So what am I gonna like? He was like, what do I do with the fact that I like both of these things? And I realized that part of the reason he was struggling with this is because he has heard me say for years that I told my first story when I was in 5th grade. I was his exact same age. I was in the same grade that he just finished. And so that influences him, right? Like hearing that story over and over influences him such that now he enjoys something else and he's very confused by this. Like I thought I was supposed to. So, and in that expression is, I think as humans, especially now, we feel like there's power in finality. There's power in knowing. There's power in like the ending of a story. Like this is now done. And I want to be this when I grow up. And I did this. I was in the military and now I am a civilian. And so anytime that there's any sort of feeling or emotion or possible reemergence of a storyline that we thought we already had figured out, it's really uncomfortable. And so one of my hopes in my work is to encourage people to just sit a little bit in what I'd call the middle of the story and like, wait, what if this isn't about a beginning or an end or something that comes across as an end? Like you finish your time, you retire from the military and you're like, and that is done. And yet you get this calling over here. There's something still in there and you remember a time. Like maybe there's a middle aspect. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go re-enlist in the military, but there's maybe something else there. And instead of fighting these what seem like conflicting storylines, but inviting them and just kind of suspending yourself to see, well, like, let's see how this story turns out. Like I thought I knew the end, but I guess I don't. Whether you're 11 or you're 41, like I am, just like that. That's even the 23 hours in LA. I was like, I thought my story was done, like I thought this is what I do. I speak about storytelling. I train on storytelling. I write books about storytelling, but maybe right? Like, and instead of closing that off, like being open to the way that the story develops, because the reality is the only thing we don't have control when it comes to our life. We don't have control over the story itself. We only have control over our observance of that story as it unfolds and the actions that we take to see what happens next.
Ooh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be no stranger to story puns, but say we're definitely on the same page here. As you're talking, you mentioned storyline. I was immediately thinking of, what are these different stories, these different alternate, different universe, different, like multiverse. My immediate mind goes to, a big Marvel fan, goes to, in Loki, that miniseries. It was like all these different parallel lines and alternate stories and alternate everythings. It's not that one is right and one is wrong, and one has begun and another has ended, or one has ended, therefore another can begin, but rather they're all kind of running simultaneously. And I love that you kind of brought home that aspect that when we think story, we think there's a beginning, there's the stuff in the middle, and then there's an end. But when it comes to us and being human, until the end, the ultimate end, which I don't even know if that really is the end, but that's a story for another day.
I know, yeah.
It's just, there are all these different through lines. And I have to laugh again because after the show was over, I went to the bathroom, was like brushing my teeth and all this stuff. And I'm walking down the hall. I'm in like the low ready. I'm just like pretending like I'm holding my rifle, and I'm hopping around the corner. I'm joking with my wife. I was like, I think I want to go to like a tactical school training. I want to kind of scratch this itch again. And she's like, shut up. No, you're not. But I was like, no, I think I want to do it. And so there's that story again popping up. And it's so funny you bring this up now, that my military career did end, that little portion of it. But did the story of my skill set and my interest doing those things end? I don't know. It's coming up because, again, here in the interview, I'm just like, I'm pretending like I'm back with my rifle. Yeah.
I know. And it's such and instead of, because it is it can be a little bit unsettling, because we've heard And it's true. Like you have to put, if you like to get anywhere, you have to choose a path and then take steps forward on that path. And so if you're constantly distracted by other paths and other like, you know, like, oh, maybe I should, then you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to kind of, right. You're just going to kind of wander around. So there is a case to be made for not calling squirrel every time like a shiny. However, there is a difference then, or there's an art to the curiosity of like, wow, why do I feel this way? And like how interesting. I wonder where this story is going to take me. And again, that comes to that openness that we just, I mean, and this is the thing that I didn't get a chance to tell my son because we, you know, you and I got on the call right away after we got off the subway and we washed our hands because the subway is still gross. It's just like,
I think that's always going to be a New York thing. Yeah,
just a state of being.
Pandemic
like you
or
just
not.
have yeah, exactly. Like you wash your hands after the subway. And then I came in here. But something that I wanted to say to him is that I can only tell the story of my 11-year-old self because I've had 30 years. That story only makes sense. That moment when I told my first story only made sense 10 years later, right? It only made sense 20 years later when I was still researching the power of story. When I was 11, I was just having fun telling stories, right? And so
as an 11-year-old should, absolutely.
Exactly. And whether you're 11 or 21 or 51 or 75, however, to see there's like that flexibility of like, wow, well, this, I think I'm in a story right here. Like, let's see how this turns out. I really and it's a valuable approach if you see your life as an evolving story or stories, when you face challenges, right? When things don't go the way you thought they would, or something goes terribly awry, or you face loss or trauma or whatever it is, after the initial shock of it and the pain of it, to then take a breath and say, well, this is the middle of a story. Like where is this story going? I'm very interested to see where this story is going to go from here. I had a woman, I like posted on Instagram a quote that was something like, if you don't like the way the story ends, like don't end the story there, right? Like that, you know, like any of our failures, any of the things that didn't happen that we hoped that we would, relationships that broke, things that we regret, whatever. And somebody commented and said, so are you saying that a story never ends? And it was kind of like, you know, like even after we die. And you kind of alluded to it there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, I
don't think so.
I feel that there are generational stories living like I am living out my grandmother's story, right? Who grew up in the time that she grew up in and was only allowed to do certain things. And she and I have similar spirits. And so I definitely feel that I am a continuation of her story. And I would like to think that she saw that too in me before she passed, right? Like, here's where my story goes. And any of the wisdom that she passed on to me was just giving me ink, right? It was just ink for me to like write the next chapter. So I don't know. I think as we're all looking for the meaning of life, let's get really deep here.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where it is.
Could be. And, you know, someone, I've definitely talked about this a lot on the show, so I'll save the audience another episode all about it. But as someone who's gone through multiple psychedelic psychotherapies sessions, I could tell you the story does not end here on this side. That's for damn sure.
I want to know more about that. I have to go back and listen to I missed the episodes. I need to go back and listen.
I did actually, I'll link it down in the show notes for everybody. I did a solo episode late last fall. Would have been late last fall, 2021. describing my first 2 ketamine assisted psychotherapy sessions at a clinic here in Los Angeles. And actually, there's one in New York as well. Shout out Field Trip. And yeah, I went in to address some PTSD and to, intentionally revisit the most traumatic event in my life in order to hopefully get past it. And I did, and then some. But the experience was definitely the storyline that is going on outside of this world, for damn sure. I mean, yeah, I'll send it to you after we're done.
Yeah,
here. You check it out.
I want to know. I'm so into I just want to know more. I've never,
I just want to know more too. I want to know all the things.
I know, where do I get more things, right? That's really cool.
We do get a lot more things when we become aware of the things that we're talking about. And we do get a lot more explanation or more questions when, we continue this unraveling of the story inside of us. I do kind of want to go back. I think you were talking, or you mentioned something that I think is another kind of form of influence in stories that is not as directly related to our influence in our story as we're talking about, but how our stories are passively, actively influencing the stories of others, particularly with your son. And my wife and I talk about this all the time. We don't have children yet, but we now just in our own journey of this just constant pursuit of levels of awareness, we are already talking about like how we would want to say, or hopefully, I'm sure you're a parent, you can never say the right thing, but what we say and how we say it influences and imprints on children so young. And you kind of passively talking about your story with your son actively changed his story for him. So if you could kind of talk about how, when we are going through our story and unraveling it and understanding it, or maybe even rewriting it or writing a new chapter, do we need to be mindful of passive influence on the stories of others, or what role does that play in our own story?
I mean, I think that we do not have control over the stories that people remember about us, right? Like if my mother were to say, where they say like, oh, it's the Newlywed Show, and you go on the Newlywed Show and they take the one.
How well do you know your partner?
Yeah, exactly. How well do you know? And it was they give this list and the other partner gives this list, and they never line up. The same would be true for any influential relationship there is, right? Like a coach, if you were to sit a coach down with an athlete and the coach to say, what were the 3 pieces of advice, the most important pieces, like what were the 3 most important stories that your athletes would remember about you? And that coach would list the 3, and the athletes would list 100 ones that never aligned with the stories that the coach thought they would tell, right? They would be these micro moments. They would be these other, and so that's one thing to know, is that we get very we can get very wrapped up in what stories people take away from us, when the reality is people are going to remember the most random things about us. Instead, if you want to have an influence, and especially a positive influence on anyone's life, whether it's a child, a sibling, someone that you're coaching, a coworker, whoever it is, it's so much more important to tell them the stories about themselves. So like if you see a coworker really struggling with like handling a client situation, and it just went totally sideways, and the way that they struggled through it, and then it came out on the other side, or a fellow soldier, right? And like you saw them like in the trenches, like working through something, and you saw their strength and you saw their decisiveness, and to tell that story. Or for me,
this is so true, so powerful.
What I mean? Like it's more important because we don't know what they're gonna like. I can't say, I want you to remember every day that I woke up in the morning and we did the Wordle together. Like I want you to remember the time that you can't force that on someone, but what you can do is retell them the stories about themselves. And this is a method that I've been using with my kids. So like my son is naturally really good at math. He's very good at math. And he such that like math, it just like he doesn't even really have to think about it, which is great for me because I'm terrible at math.
Must be nice. So, yeah.
I know. I was like, all my friends are like,
I don't math good.
I know. I'm not can't math. It is a verb as far as I'm concerned. And all of my other mom friends are like, oh my gosh, were you working on the math homework? And I'm like, I don't have to work on the math homework because that is. But then my son encountered like they were dealing with some like fraction something. I don't even know the name for it. And it was really hard for him. And he like broke down in tears and he was really struggling. And then he figured it out and then it was done and it was back to easy street. Now that would have been a blip that he never would have even remembered, that he spent an entire afternoon crying about this particular math thing, which is a disservice because he's going to encounter challenging math problems and challenging problems in life forever, right? So as a mother or any outside person to be like, okay, you struggled here. So that night before he went to bed, I was like, hey, let's revisit what happened today. Do you remember how this, and I retold him the story of this particular math concept. And like, you know how it was really hard. I said, as you keep progressing in math, the problems are going to get harder and you're going to have more of these moments. And I just want you to remember that you can have these moments and you can get through to the other side of them where it gets easier. But reinforcing that resilience, that perseverance, that is more important than any story. Like that will be more influential, if you will, than anything. However, there are also opportunities to, when like there is a difficult decision that has to be made, I think that or you're trying to help someone through something and just telling them what to do isn't the right solution, right? That those are also opportunities to share like one of your own stories. So for example, my daughter, let's go back to kids, faced a challenging situation at ballet. And it was kind of and she's in this very tedious ballet. It's not like pretty, like, oh, let's all dress up in tutus. Like there are no tutus. It is just like pure bar, but for an hour and a half, 3 times a week. Oof. For an 8-year-old. It's like, wow. I can't go to 20 minutes of pure bar.
Yeah, I don't even do that. Yeah.
No, it's terrible. And she just like, that's all they do is like out, in, up, down. Anyway, there was a moment and she was like, maybe I'm done. I kind of want to quit. And, my husband took her, we were kind of at a loss. It was a weird situation. And my husband took her out for dessert. She loves dessert, as all ballerinas do when they're 8 years old. And they went out for dessert. And instead of saying, here's what I think you should do, or here's what, you're strong, you should persevere, because we really didn't know. We were like, is this one of those moments when we're like, all right, let's be done with this? He told her the story of the time that he was in college and the coach called him on the water polo team, called him into the office and said, you need to either step up or step off. I've got people that want this more than you. And he was a senior and
nobody likes to hear that,
right? And he said, I decided to be done. And I've regretted it ever since. And so just know that when you decide to be done, that that's a big decision.
There are consequences no matter what your decision is.
And he just he kind of laid it out, like, you can be done. Like that can be sometimes being done is the right decision. And we fully support that. And so I didn't really know what they talked about. They came home from dessert and they didn't bring any leftovers. So I was upset about that.
Rude as hell.
So like, what? But I said, so what do you think about ballet? She's like, I think I want to keep going for the rest of the year, one more year, whatever it was. And it was like, that was the decision that she came to herself. But the story definitely influenced her. But the story influenced her, and it could have influenced her the other way as well. Because I don't know that he actually fully said that he regretted it, or if he just left that in suspension. And she could just pick up on the feeling. So sometimes when it comes to influencing the most important people in your life, just sharing a story is the most effective thing you can do.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. And what I'm hearing in your examples and in your explanation, when it comes to really truly understanding our story and wanting to kind of put ourselves on the path, on the page to a new one, the difficulty comes with the struggle. And the struggle comes from the emotional attachment that we're having to trying to understand what happened, what is happening, and what is going to happen. How then can we develop a better emotional state, a better emotional connection? Or is it really, okay, no, I need to just try to have neutrality, and I need to try to remove emotion to be as objective as possible, and then make the best step, the best decision that I can? I know that's kind of easier said than done, but emotion plays a huge role here.
Yeah, I think that with the self-storytelling process, a big piece of it is, we hear about like owning your story, and it sounds so cliche, but to really say like this, and the book isn't called Change Your Story, Change Your Life. Like, you can't change the stories, right? All you can change is how you feel about those stories. And I think so if you're struggling with the emotions from old stories, then the best step for and that struggle is keeping you stuck. Okay, so if the struggle is a positive thing, and it's fueling change
You're
and
learning
growth,
from
whatever,
it, growing from it.
then that's fine. But sometimes we still focus on the story without acknowledging the growth that we've already made, right? And so if you're feeling stuck in old stories, ask yourself the question, okay, so are there stories since that time that are evidence, or that exhibit the characteristics that I've wanted to become, or that I'm working towards, or that I'm proud of? And
Where are
much
the
like
receipts? Where are the receipts?
exactly
Yeah.
exactly and much like we were talking about, way at the beginning of this conversation, the physical fitness testing, and how you're only focusing on the thing that you can't do. I'm only focusing on the thing that I can't do.
Maybe that's why I try to do yoga so much now. It all goes back to first grade.
Yes, it probably
Not getting the presidential physical fitness award because of flexibility. Who knows?
And there are some realities, right? Like maybe you needed to work on flexibility, but it doesn't, like, it's so funny that flexibility is your thing, because you were so like, it's like, no, I am firmly not flexible. Like, you need to be flexible about your flexibility. Like, that is not a permanent state necessarily. Right. And so I think that we can beat ourselves up about the old stories and carry them with us, even when there is a lot of stories between that time and where we are now that show that we've learned. I had a conversation with my mother, who holds a lot of my old stories, because she was there when I was a teenager. She was there, and she was expressing her concern when she came to visit us that maybe we had taken on too much, that our lives were just too busy, and that we should just like scale back a little bit. And I mean, she's a retired woman who lives with my dad in like a remote cabin in the woods of northern Minnesota. Like, she's living in, and she
anything is going to seem like a lot compared to that.
Exactly. And then you add to it that, we're in New York City, that we have, like, there's so many things. So all of that, I knew all of that. But what really, it hurt me, I was like, oh, and then I started to question myself, like, am I pushing too hard? Am I doing too much? And I went back to that place of being a place of concern, which is where she was coming from, of my like 16-year-old self. And I had to actively tell myself and then tell her the stories of the work I've done to offset that person, of the opportunities that I say no to so that I can preserve my sanity, of the very careful vetting process I go to before I take on a new opportunity, about the, like, I've definitely come to this place in my career where I'm kind of like, I don't want to. And so I just don't. Right. And so, but she doesn't see any of that because she doesn't live with me. She's not raising me anymore. And so I think sometimes we have to actively work to update our own story bank, because we can revert back to the really old negative stuff when there is actually a whole lot of stories of progress in between.
I love that. I love kind of showing ourselves, or learning how to show ourselves, all the other stories that actually support what we're after and help us develop a better emotional state to that story that we're trying to understand or write. And, personally speaking, to kind of keep going with the emotional attachment here, I have developed such better relationships to the most important through lines in my life story, by pausing on trying to force. I want to understand this story, and I want to get better at it. I want to get better at knowing it, sharing it, all the above, and kind of tabling that and work first on the emotion with it. By that, I mean, case in point, we would not be here today on this podcast, Everforward Radio, if it were not for the death of my father in 2005. Ever forward was his phrase, his mantra, this thing that he instilled in my entire family growing up. And for many, many years after his death, I ran away from that story because I was afraid of it. I was afraid of what would happen if I finally worked through it, if I let him go, if I didn't have anything other than just this intensely dark emotional attachment to it. So what I did was, through a lot of things we've been talking about, through the journaling, through the self-help, through the professional help, through the ketamine, it is really to, first get a better emotional state, develop a better emotional state, so that in that more cool, calm, and collected state, I can actually really look at the story in a way that I feel finally honors it. But more importantly, I think anybody could do this, is when you are in a better emotional state, you can better look to your future. You can better look to the story that you now want to write for today, tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So I think sometimes we maybe need to table the storytelling and understanding, work on the emotion, and then we're kind of back in the power seat,
What makes a story powerful are the emotions, right? Like that's what drives
Truly,
them.
yeah.
That's what
hooks us.
Exactly. That's what gives them. So to spend some time to use that emotion as a guide versus all the things around it can be, well, as you've experienced, extremely valuable, and then as a result, productive, right? For moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, kind of getting towards the end here. It's been so great having you on the show. I hope everybody can check out the video as well. You're like bright, shining joy to just like sit and be present with. So thank you. Here we are halfway through 2022. Can you give us a couple tangible, 1-2 tactics to get better at writing tomorrow's story, for the listener, for the viewer right here, right now? Because we've all been through so much individually, collectively. There's our life story, and then there's the world story that we have, we're now getting through. 1-2 tactics to get better at writing our story that we want for tomorrow.
Yeah, I would say the first thing, and we mentioned this earlier, but it's so important, is to find, and this is going to be very tactical, but to find opportunities throughout your day where you can pause and pay attention to the story you're telling yourself. So maybe it's when you're driving in the car. I have a car, so I don't drive in the car, but when you kind of get lost in thought, and to have it to pause while you're in the car, not driving, but to pause that automatic thinking and ask yourself, wait, what story am I telling myself right here? I know for me, a big time where I have some self-storytelling happening is in the shower as I've just finished my workout. I'm in the shower, I'm getting ready for my day, and all of a sudden, all of the thoughts of what the day is going to bring, all the things I have to do, and I start telling myself this story of, you can't do all this. You've taken on more than you can handle.
Mom was right. Mom was right.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It's so cute, because that's where, and so to catch yourself in these old stories, because they will then influence what happens for the rest of your day. So I think that is, awareness is absolutely key. And then the second thing that I would recommend, and I recommend this because it's something that I've been going through, is to anytime to use the word, whenever you hear the word should, or you hear yourself saying the word should, that is an automatic red flag, or I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, to stop and take a look at the stories that are leading to the word should. Because while there is a whole lot going on collectively, certainly, and we're all influenced by the people in our lives, by the things that we take in, whether it's podcast, media, social, whatever it is, you will be your most powerful when you are very in touch with what you want and what feels powerful to you, and not what you feel like you should be doing. And it's only when we can separate our own stories from everybody else that we can then move forward in a positive, productive way to influence the smaller communities that we're a part of, whether that's friends, family, the cities that we live in, the country that we love. So separating, it's okay to take a moment to separate from all the noise around you and all the shoulds, to get your story straight, so that you can move forward in what as of right now is the right direction.
Thank you for that. And it leads me to my final question that I ask every guest. Speaking of moving forward, kind of sharing with you a little bit of the backstory behind Ever Forward. I'm always curious what that means to my guests. So now that we've run through your expertise and you've helped us understand our story and storytelling so much better, thank you. How do you live a life ever forward? When you hear those two words, what does that mean to you here today, Kindra?
I feel like it means, I just picture like wide eyes and a smile of like, what could be next? And with faith and a bit of fear, right? But like, what could be next for me? Because as each of us move into what is next for each of us, it only means great things for everyone around us, right? And so Ever Forward, I know from experience, isn't necessarily always easy. Sometimes Ever Forward feels like backwards. It feels like against the grain. It feels like it weighs a million pounds. But if we approach that with like hope and wonder and possibility, it's a really good thing.
What a powerful way to take on the vastness that is our story. And, sure, pretty much every listening right now is an adult. But what I really heard in your explanation there was just this awe, this childish awe and wonder. Sometimes I think that might be powerful enough to help us reduce the struggle that we're facing, to develop a better emotion when whatever that emotion, that lens is, when we're looking at our story. Because that just I think helps all the bullshit kind of dissolve.
Yeah. Yep.
And we see a lot more possibility.
Yep, exactly. All the cynicism, it's like, wait, but what is possible? Like, why not that? There are good stories to be told. I believe it.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. As we wrap up here, officially, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to have your work, the book and everything listed down in the show notes for everybody. This was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Kindra.
Such a pleasure. I can't wait to see what happens next.